Record. We learned today Liuli Nishmat Avigdor Chayavram ben Rachalev Mer Tzvi and the Shamash Shnev Aliyah. I'm going to put on the screen the Mishnah we're on. One moment. Okay. I'm going to reread the whole Mishnah. We already did the first half, and we're going to do the second half this morning, possibly the next Mishnah as well. One of the things I find that when I'm preparing for a class is that one thing leads to another. So where I thought maybe I'm just going to teach 10 minutes on something, turns out to be maybe half an hour because it kind of rolls like a snowball, one thing grows. And I think that one of the things I'd like to bring up this morning has to do with the second half of this Mishnah. And I think it'll help apply to a lot of things we do in life. One of the goals of Pirke Avot is not just to give us ethical lessons, how to be good people, because it's mostly about being Adam L'Chavero, not only about how to be good servant of Hashem, but that's the surface level. There's always something deeper when it comes to Mishnah. And I think we're going to find a couple of things buried a little bit into this Mishnah that will help us in life. So let's look at the Mishnah again. Rabbi Elazar, again, the first half we did. I'm only reading it to get into the second half. Rabbi Elazar ish bar Tota omer, ten lo mishalo, shata v'shalcha shalo. Give to Hashem which is His, because what you have is really His. Anyways, v'chein b'David hu omer, ki mimcha hakol u'miyadcha natanu lach. So we talked about this idea that we look how, especially when it comes to our possessions and when it comes to our funds, our money, how we should look at the idea that what we have is on loan from Hashem. It's not ours. I mean, it is ours because if I take your money, I'm stealing from you. But it's not that it's that we have complete control over. It's something Hashem gave to us as a pikadon, as a to take care of, watch, and use as necessary. Second half of the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon or Rabbi Yaakov. There are two different versions of this. I was originally going to discuss why, but it's boring, so I'm not going to get into that. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Hamahalech baderech. If someone is walking, they're going on the road, they're taking a trip, or they're walking on the road, Vishoneh, and they're learning Torah. Now, I will tell you in advance, this half of the Mishnah and the next one, if we get to it, are two that are going to leave you going like, what? How can you say something like that? So don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Hamalech baderech v'shoneh. Person's in the middle of learning while they're walking on the road. Umafsik mimishanato ve'omer. And he stops his learning. And he looks up and he says, Mana'et ilanzeh. Wow, what a beautiful tree. Umana'et nirzeh. And how beautiful this field is. Ma'aleh alav ha'katuv ki'ilu mitchayev b'nafsho. Torah looks at it as if he says here, what, mortally guilty. It means like he put his life in danger. Which kind of, I mean, the obvious question really is how do you say something like that? That's kind of extreme. Everybody, no matter who they are, when they're learning, at some point they're going to be distracted. They're going to look up. So it sounds like if I'm walking from my house to Shul, and I have a little Mishnah in my hand, I'm learning it. And I look out and say, wow, look at that tree. The blossoms are beautiful. Wow, mitchayev b'nafsho. Like I've done something. I put myself in mortal danger. Just doesn't sound right. So let's talk about a couple things. The more obvious question might be, or maybe same level obviousness, is the way that it's worded. Why does it have to say in the Mishnah? Why does Rabbi Shimon say someone's going on the way and he's learning and he interrupts his learning? Just say someone who's in the middle of learning, and he interrupts his learning, and to say, wow, what a beautiful tree, then mitchayev b'nafsho. What's this business about him walking on the way? So there are two possible answers here. There's many, two which I'll share. One is the answer of Rashi. He said that it is inherent that when a person is traveling, there's some danger. Interestingly enough, let me just kind of digress for a second. Maybe a year or two ago, when I was in Shul, Mishkan Shoshana, the Sephardi show up the hill, there was a guy who got an aliyah to the Torah, and he benched Gomel. The bracha you say after you've been sick, or things that have gone. And he said, he bench Gomel. I went over, he said, everything okay? He says, yeah, everything's fine. I said, so why'd you bench Gomel? He says, because I drove to Haifa yesterday. I said, yeah, so? He says, well, Rav Avadia Yosef Zatzal, Paskin, that if you drive more than 72 minutes of a distance, I remember what exactly the criteria was, on the road in Israel, I don't know if he said it everywhere, you should bench Goma. So he did. So I said, okay. Well, I'm only mentioning that because the idea being that in general, when one is not in one's home, one's traveling, they're on the way, there's some inherent potential danger. Whether it was in their days, you could get hit by a cart. Today, God forbid, by a car, an animal, whatever it could be, all kinds of dangers. And what protects a person? We know the Torah is Megina. The Torah protects us. So therefore, if a person's on the road is already inherently in a problematic type of position of potential danger, if they stop their learning, even if it's just, sorry, to say, wow, what a beautiful tree or what a beautiful field, he's putting himself in danger because he's removing that protective cover, so to speak, for that moment. That's what Rashi says. But Bartanura, which is not just a wine, Bartanura says, Rabbi Bartanura said that keep in mind another thing. He could have just said, person's going on the way and he interrupts his learning. Then what does it mean? He interrupts his learning and say, wow, what a beautiful tree. Why Dafka tree? He says, now, here we are right now. We are just after Purim. We're just before Pesach, before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And we know that in Chodesh Nisan, we know that there is a mitzvah of Birkat Ilanot. And this applies even to Chutz La'aretz, that starting Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the end of the month, there's a mitzvah that you go in front of at least two fruit trees that are flowery, not easy to say, that you say a special bracha, meaning there are all kinds of things that even though you are in the process of going to maybe to do a mitzvah, or you're looking at just praising Hashem, it's like, wow, look at that gorgeous sunset or gorgeous sunrise. It's Marabu Ma'asech Hashem, how great are your acts, Hashem. Even if you're doing something like that, Torah still takes precedence and shouldn't be interrupting. But again, we have another problem, which I keep mentioning, and I'm going to say it again until we come to some kind of an answer here. It just doesn't seem to make any sense, the whole idea. Nobody in their right mind, nobody, not even Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, who would learn from 2 a.m. till 10 o'clock at the night the next night, almost consistently, is able to live by something like this. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. So the Bartanura is kind of pointing out to us that even though a person is doing something that's not dvarim b'telim, he's not just saying like, wow, I wonder what the score in the Cubs game is. Well, they're probably losing. That's a different story. I wonder what the score in the game is, and take a look at on his phone for a minute. It's not that. It's even when he's doing something, in a sense, it's praiseworthy of Hashem. Because when you say, wow, how beautiful sunset, or how beautiful the tree, how beautiful the field, you're really saying it's praise of Hashem. Nevertheless, you shouldn't do it because Torah is supreme. And Kal V'chomer, much more so, not to interrupt for something that's absolutely a time waster. When I was learning this and was thinking what the Bartanura said, I came up with what I think might be an interesting, similar idea. Imagine you're sitting in the park and you have your children or your grandchildren with you, and someone comes over and says, wow, your children, your grandchildren, they are so cute. You say, you think that's cute? You got to see their pictures. You take out their pictures, right? So, like, what's more important, the actual child that's there or the picture of the child? So the idea being that we want to make sure that what's the authentic? What's authentic here? The authentic part is that we want to make sure. I want to move this around here better so I can make here 1 second. Sorry about that. There. I don't know why I have to move it. Anyways, that the authentic thing is the Torah. The praise of Hashem is authentic also, but it's secondary because Torah we know is Talmud Torah connected Kulan, that the learning of Torah is equal to everything else. We have to keep in mind, though, a word that I underlined here. We're not talking about a person who picks up a Chumash or Gemara or Tehillim or Mesilat Yesharim once in a great while. We're talking about a word here, a person. It says Amalech Baderech Vishonet. It doesn't say Lomed. Okay, even though the English probably says learning. Let's just see. Interrupts his study. Okay, that's actually a better word. He interrupts his study. What's the difference between learning and studying? So let's say I learn, Parshat Shavua once a week for 20 minutes. And that's my whole Torah for the week, God forbid. That's not a person who's shonet halacha or shonet Torah. You're not engrossed in Torah. That's not what you're doing a lot and spending your time on. It's something you learned. You picked up something you learned. We're talking about a person in this type of situation that's what they do. They learn. And such a person who interrupts their learning, then mitchayav b'nafsho. But what does it mean? And how is that important? How is that any different? Why should it be that the person who is learning consistently shouldn't interrupt their learning, and a person who is learning on occasion may need to be able to do that? Something doesn't add up here. That's what I'm trying to point out. So I want to talk about consistency for a few minutes. Then we're going to come back to all these questions. I want to talk about that topic. So let's take a look at the idea that's brought at the end of Masechet. There's a Mishne at the end of Masechet Nida that says as follows: Tana Devei Eliyahu, I was taught in the Beit Midrash of Eliyahu, Kol hashoneh halachot b'chol yom, muftach lo shehu ben olam haba. You're probably familiar with these words. It's said at the end of Tefillah, that whoever learns halacha on a daily basis is guaranteed he's going to be going to olam haba. So first of all, why? Because if he learns halacha, he knows how to keep Torah mitzvot, and therefore he'll do the right thing, get olam haba. But it's even more than that. This is talking about a person who learns something daily, someone who has a zman kavua, a set time to learn. Doesn't say kol hashana halachot kol hayom. He sits and learns halacha all day, but it means bichol yom, every day. This is something different than we said in the Tefillah class the other night in one of the brachot. So it's a different perspective now. That if a person learns every day, he's guaranteed a place in the world to come. What's the bare minimum someone has to learn? So if someone says Shema in the morning and Shema at night, that's considered Vagita B'Yomam V'Layla. It's a pasuk that people think is in Chumash. It's not. It's a pasuk in the beginning of Sefer Yoshua that one should be a day and night should be studying Torah. Okay, so what does this mean here, this Mishnah? It means someone who has a consistency to their learning. It's a praiseworthy thing. Let's just leave it at that. It's a very praiseworthy thing. I'm going to prove it even further. Actually, before the slide, there is a sefer set. It's called Ein Yaakov. Ein Yaakov is basically a compilation of the various stories, legends, mystical teachings, and other things that are found in the Talmud. And without the Gemara, without the regular halachic aspect, just the stories you might find. And it's compiled into a set of Sfarim. And many years ago, I don't know how common it is today, but many years ago, like when I was a kid, and even go back 100 years ago, 150 years ago, people who could not learn Gemara or could learn Gemara, but they wanted something different. It was very common, especially in the times of the Shtetl, to have groups that would sit and learn Ein Yaakov, because it was a little bit lighter, and then there were also deeper lessons to be learned, and you didn't want to take everything that's written there as take it on face value. It had a deeper meaning, but it wasn't as difficult and contrived as maybe the Talmud, the rest of the Gemara itself. And the introduction to the book, there's someone who's just known as the Hakotev, the writer, the author, says as follows. He said he has like a discussion with himself, and some of you may have heard this before. This is not original. This is right from Ein Yaakov. Says the question is like this: what is considered the most important pasuk in Torah? So the question itself is nuts, because we know there's no difference between Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, Breshit bara Elokim, all these pasuk, every pasuk has in value, is important. So the question is, what is the most important pasuk? So there are three opinions given. One, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, Hashem God, Hashem is one. Second person said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the very first of the Aserta Dibrot, which is the statement. It's either a statement or an introduction, or it is a mitzvah of emunah, that I am Hashem, the Lord your God. The third one is like so far out of left field, it doesn't even seem to fit here. And it is the following, that in the Beit HaMikdash, there was a Korban Tamid. Korban Tamid, by definition, was something that was consistently done. Every day they brought every morning, the day, the Avodah, the service in Beit HaMikdash, began with the bringing of a keves, a lamb. At the beginning of the day, a korban. At the end of the day, it was the last korban. Like, I can understand Shema Yisrael being, according to some, the most important pasuk. I can understand I am the Lord your God being the most important. How in the world does Keves Echad Taseh B'Boker become anywhere near these ideas and these lofty ideas of being the most important pasuk in the Torah? So, in another, let's see, how many are 16, 20, 12 years from now, just over 12 years from now, 2 days after Pesach is over, the Jews around the world were going to stand up early in the morning and going to say a bracha that's made once every 28 years. It's called Birkat HaChama. Birkat HaChama is a bracha that's made when the sun is in its position that it was on the day of creation relative to the rest of the universe, especially to the earth. How do we know that? I have no idea, but that's the deal. It's a bracha made once every 28 years. Last time it was done was just almost 16 years ago. So therefore, there's 12 more years to go. So when people, there are books written about it and svarim written and pamphlets and all kinds of stuff, it's just one bracha. There's all kinds of stuff you say along with it, but it's literally just one bracha. And it's the blink of an eye. So the question is, when a person gets to make that bracha, and they get up in the morning and they go outside and hopefully see the sun, because you don't make it if it's cloudy, is the intensity and the thought and the feelings when they stand to make that bracha different than when they took an apple today and said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz? Obviously, for 99.999% of people who make those two brachot, the borei pri ha'etz and the one on Birkat HaChama, the answer is going to be, of course, they're not the same. Borei pri ha'etz, unfortunately, we say, we throw out a bracha. Unfortunately, people very often, if without thinking, you say a bracha without thinking. But when it comes to the Birkat HaChama, whoa, once every 28 years. So I actually remember last time when two people made this comment to you. They were in their upper 70s, I think. I'm trying to remember. They were older than I am right now. They called me after they made the bracha, and two different people, and they were crying. I said it was that overwhelming, since it was overwhelming for another reason. They realized that unless the Mashiach comes, that more than likely, statistically, they're not going to see another one like this and make this bracha again, which is why they focus so much on it. So when you do something infrequently, especially something that infrequently, but let's take something more common. When you're getting Tikiyat Shofar, you go there, you hear the bracha. Megillat Esther, we just heard the brachot recently. The Leil HaSeder, you do it once a year. You're going to make a bracha on the matzah. It's different as something you do all the time. So what's the danger with something you do all the time? Is it becomes repetitive, and you do it as the Navi says, milimudah. You're just doing it out of habit. You're doing it out of habit and not really focusing on it, and it becomes routine. That's where the danger becomes. It's easy to get excited about Birkat HaChama. It's easy to get excited about the Tikiyat Shofar and Lulav and the things you do once a year or for a few days, like lighting the candles for Hanukkah 8 nights during the year. It's easy. But when you do something all the time, consistently, day in and day out, it's not that simple. So the third opinion, which by the way, in Yaakov and the Kotev, he said this is the accepted opinion, that the most important pasuk in the Torah, in quotes, is this pasuk, the third one, pointing like you can see what I'm pointing at. This one, that every single day, the first korban in the morning is the korban tamid. The end of the day, korban tamid. It could be like, okay, it's just another korban, but the idea was to keep it fresh. The idea was to try to maintain the consistency. It wasn't just keeping it fresh, but maintaining the consistency day in, day out. So that if a person learns, we'll not give that a person learns 10 minutes a day, every single day. They come home from shul and they spend 10 minutes learning, or after they eat lunch, or before they go to sleep. They said, I'm gonna learn 10 minutes of Mishnah, Parshat Shavua, Musar, whatever it might be. But they're doing it on a consistent basis. That is a fantastic, fantastic thing. You are shoneh halachot or shoneh. You are a person who's shoneh. You're doing it on a consistent basis, and you're doing it as a keves echad taseh baboker. That is something that is extremely worthwhile. Ad kedei kach, and this is the second time this week I'm quoting this Gemara that now says that when a person passes away, one of the things they ask is kavata itim leTorah. Did you set aside time to learn? But it doesn't just mean that. I set aside time. Okay, so like when I can figure out today, when I have some time, I'm going to learn. That's not what it means. It means that you have a consistent time or a consistent day you learn. Let's say someone says, look, I go to this guy's channel. If he's got classes, I'll go to 2 of his classes a week. You are setting aside time if you go every week, or you say, I don't go to the class, but I want to watch a video afterwards on YouTube. And you take the time, you sit down once a week when you're, getting ready to cook for Shabbat, and you say, I'm going to listen to him or listen to Aish.com, whatever it might be, whatever Torah it is you're learning is Torah. That's kavata itim leTorah. You have set aside an established time to learn Torah. So okay. So that is what the kind of person we're talking about in the Mishnah, the mitchayev b'nafsho, according to some, is not the type of person who doesn't learn. It's not about the type of person who it could be the type of person who learns all the time and his mind wandered and to look to do things other than the Torah. It could be a person who learns on a kavua basis, on a set basis, just a certain amount. But in any case, and again, we still haven't answered the question about, it seems a little extreme, mitchayev b'nafsho. The person has put himself in mortal danger. We have to still answer that. We're also not talking about a person who, in that Mishnah, who purposely veers away from learning. He's distracted. We're not talking about someone who says, let me just look around what's going on right now around me. Imagine for a moment, I heard this mashal, this parable from, I think it was Rabbi Pesach Kron. He should have refuah shlema, I think, but I'm not sure. Says, you imagine you going into your boss to ask for a raise. You sit down in the chair opposite his desk or her desk. You have your phone in your hand. You sit down and say, hey, good morning, boss. Listen, I want to talk to you. Oh, just a second. Hold on. Okay. Listen, I want to talk to you about a raise. Just a second. And he goes on and on, keeps going back and forth between talking to the boss and looking for a raise and going on his phone. Like, come on, what's important here? So when a person is sitting and learning, they really the best approach is to try to reduce distractions around them. If you know, for example, you're going to sit down and you're going to be distracted by X, whatever X is. If you sit outside, you might be distracted by whatever's going on around you. If you sit in your house and at your dining room table and you're going to be distracted find a place where you can sit, where you won't be distracted. It doesn't mean you don't need to take a break. It doesn't mean you might not be distracted, but when you set yourself up for failure, you're going to fail. And that's part of what this mission is about as well. But still, it's a very strong statement to say that mitchayev b'nafsho. And that's not the only place. We see this in multiple Mishnayot. We'll see it in the next one if we get to it today, that the person puts himself in danger. So the Meiri was a Rishon. Interestingly enough, the Meiri is a commentary on the Gemara. It's not in the Gemara itself. It's a very big set. And I don't remember the year it was discovered, but it was discovered many, many, many years after it was first written. It was kind of a surprise. And I don't remember when this happened, but the Meiri is a Rishon, which again, we talk about in the Jewish history class. We're talking about the different time periods of history, going to the time before, a little bit before the writing of the Shulchan Aruch. He said like this: we cannot take the words of the Tana, the author of that Mishnah, in the literal sense. Look what he said here. He says like this. He says, if he does interrupt his learning to say, wow, what a beautiful tree, it says, if ki'ilu mitchayev b'nafsho. It says if he put himself in mortal danger. Does not mean he did. I'm going to step back for a second, give you another situation where it says ki'ilu, and then we're going to come back to this one. It says kol hakoes, whoever gets extremely angry, not just gets upset because the line in the store isn't moving fast, but really angry. Ki'ilu oved avodah zara. It's as if he has served idols. Now, no one in the Jewish world will ever tell you that if you get angry, it's like you just bow down to an idol. God forbid. That's not what it means. But it has a whole meaning behind it, which I've spoken about before when we talked about anger, that you lose your shlita, you no longer are in control. If you don't know what control is, then you don't understand Hashem is the one who runs the world. And it could be, you could go as far as serving idols. But it doesn't mean you served idols. It's ki'ilu. Now, that's a word that's used in modern English a lot. It's a filler, just like kids will say like. So, like, I went to the store, and I picked up some milk, and then the Hebrew said, so it just drives me nuts. It's one of the other 10,963 things of my little pet peeves. But it means ki'ilu. It's as if. Why is he putting it in that terminology? Therefore, says the Meiri, because he's trying to have you, he, meaning Rabbi Shimon, is trying to have us understand how critical it is that when you are learning to stay focused on what you're doing. In spite of the fact of even looking away might be a praise of Hashem and saying, wow, what a beautiful tree, or maybe even break away to make the bracha Birkat Ilanot, which will be making starting it again in a little less than 2 weeks from now. Doesn't make a difference. Focus on the Torah. Focus on the learning. But wait, what about a need to take a break? Come up for air? Everyone needs that. I've said before, and again, it's not my Torah. I said the word recreation is the word to recreate. You need to recreate yourself. You need to come to a level where your mind is clear, is rested, and can move on. So when a person learns on a consistent basis, and now I'm not talking about the 10 minutes here and there on a daily basis, but I mean many hours, it's fine. It's cool. You need to take a break. You need to take. Very often, you'll find it in the Beis Medrash in Yeshivot, Yeshiva Goa, that you have a general schedule. You start at say 9 o'clock in the morning, and the first seder, the first time learning session, and learning, and then there's class, and then there's a break for lunch, and then a rest time. So usually, say this, making it approximate, say 1:30 to 3. You come back for 3 o'clock, and it's mincha, and you move on, and you have another break later on, but. So they're built in because it's necessary, because it does have to happen. But a person who spends a limited amount of time learning, again, 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, it's wonderful, it's fantastic. But you don't have the same luxury of taking a break during that time as someone who spends a large part of the day learning. I was trying to come up with a parable to make this fit, and I think I came up with something. Picture a father or a mother, but I'm using father in this case, a father who's home, goes to work and comes home and spends time with the kids and helps with homework, drives carpool, is involved. So in that kind of situation, the fact that the father might not be spending every second when the kids are home with the child, okay, it's normal. It's not that it would be abnormal that every second, and most kids wouldn't want that anyways, nor the father, that they're constantly with the kid. Now, take that same father, same great relationship with their child. He's been in Miluim now for 3 months. And finally, he's coming home for a long weekend. From Thursday to a Sunday, he's going to be home. He doesn't want to miss a second with the child. The children don't want to miss a second with that father. So in a sense, when you're talking about when someone spends a tremendous amount of time learning, the breaks and the necessary distractions, quote unquote, it's part of it. It goes with it. But when a person is spending X amount of time, let's say someone goes to a class for 45 minutes a week, and that's their entire Torah during the week, and that's great because they set aside the time for those 45 minutes. And even for those 45 minutes, it might be difficult for that person to set aside the time, but they do that. That's not the time to be playing on the phone. It's not the time to be trying to think about what you're going to make for Shabbat. It's not the time to. It means focus on that. You don't have the same luxury as somebody who's spending a lot more time learning. What's called the Balei HaMusar, people who try to teach ethical behavior. and teach you how to be a good Jew. Whether it's through the book of Der Hashem, Avot, and others, is a pretty common, well-known parable out there. It has to do with a pot of boiling water. So let's say you have a pot and you want to put it on the fire and you want to boil the water. It's going to take 15 minutes for it to boil. So you put the pot on, turn the gas on, you turn the flame, and you put it on, you let it burn for 15 minutes, and boom, you have boiling hot water after 15 minutes. That's one approach. Now, what happens? You take that same pot, same water, same fire, you put the pot on, and after 2 minutes, you take the pot off. And then you wait a couple minutes, you put the pot on, and you take it off. Put it on, take it off. You keep doing that. It's never going to boil. You're never going to get to that point of real heat. So the same thing is true when it comes to learning Torah. It's fantastic to learn and set aside time, even if it's a minimal amount of time. But to get to the point where the heat lahavut, true, like a burning passion for what a person is doing for Torah and for growth, that only happens with greater amounts of learning. And not just greater amounts, but consistency. That a person, let's say they learn 45 minutes a week, now they learn an hour and a half a week. Or they learn once a day, they take out twice a day. I will tell you, as the expression goes, Ed Rishon, I can give you personal testimony that, with no details now, that even a small amount of something every single day, you make massive amounts of growth and change and learning. There's the famous story, of course, of Rabbi Akiva, who saw the water dripping into the stone. He saw that if the water could drip onto the stone and over time make a hole in the stone, he says, so too the words of Torah could penetrate me. What if that same amount of water over time, the drip, 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 was all at one time? It wouldn't have made any difference to the stone. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. So that's something that really needs to be heard, needs to be said, that whatever you're doing, whatever amount of Torah you learn now, whether it's just coming to these classes, I mean but coming to my classes, or going to my class in somebody else's class, or watching something on video, that's fantastic. Add something. Starting today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Add something already today. And that's why I'm saying that the Mishnayot that we are learning, Pirke Avot, this is true with all Mishnah, but especially in Pirke Avot, it's not just what the surface level of the words mean. It's not just about that. It has to do also with, when you go below the surface, the kind of lessons it's trying to tell us as well. And yet, as is true with everything, we have the ability in Judaism to twist the good into the bad. The interpretation for this Mishnah can also be, you see, we shouldn't be doing anything except learning. That's it. No reason to do anything else. And the expression goes on, Mevin Yavin, whoever understands, understands. We have to be very careful in how we transmit this idea of the importance of Torah. Importance of Torah can never come at the expense of someone's life. Let's just leave it at that. Okay, we're going to look at the next Mishnah. I think, unless I want to do this first. Yeah, I want to. This is the next Mishnah. Okay, make it a little bigger. Mishnah Chet. This is chapter 3, Mishnah Chet, Mishnah number 8. If you're using your book, we read it, translate it, and then we're going to talk about it. Not go too much into depth, but right now, but a little bit of information on it. This is one of those Mishnayot that, again, until you get to the end, you're going to say, like, what? So have a little patience till I read through the whole thing. Rabbi Dastai Rabbi Yanai, Mishum Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Dastai said in the name of Rabbi Yanai, who learned from Rabbi Meir, Kol ha'shochech davar echad mimishnato. Whoever forgets one thing they've learned, ma'aleh alav ha'katuv kilu mitchayev benafsho. Same words that we saw in the last Mishnah, that if you forget one thing you've learned, it's like you've made yourself mortally guilty. You put yourself in mortal danger. Again, this is like, what are you talking about? How in the world can you make such a statement? Everyone forgets something. Now, he even proves that he's right. For it says in Pasuk in Dvarim, Rak hisham elacha ushmol nafshecha me'od. Be extremely careful, as what it says in English, it's scrupulous. Pen tishkachet hadvarim asher ra'u einecha. This actually refers to Har Sinai. Don't ever forget what you saw with your own eyes at Har Sinai. So before we go any further, if I were to read this and say, okay, we'll continue next week, you're all going to go like, oh man, we're all doomed. Like, there's not a single person alive that hasn't forgotten at least one thing he's learned. I can tell you again, Ed Rishon, I've forgotten plenty of things. We all have. As the older you get, the more you can forget also. He continues and he qualifies. You might think that this is true, that even if it's too difficult for him to remember, or he's unable to remember something, that just like Stam, that's what he's talking about. That's not what he means. Talmud Lamar, therefore we learn the pasuk, Ufen yasuru milvavacha kol yemei chayecha. Now the English translation doesn't fit. He says here that they do not fade from your mind as long as you live. That's not what it means. Pen yasuru lehasir in English, in Hebrew, means to remove, to actively remove something. If I say to you, lahasir et zeh me'ashulchan, remove it from the table, means what he's talking about here in this Mishnah is not just you forgot something. It means you actively forget. You purposely said, you know what, I don't need that. I couldn't care less about it. You remove it. You're only considered mortally guilty if until you deliberately, actively remove them from your heart. So someone says, let's say someone grew up here, and whatever reason they decide to move to Chutz La'aretz, and they move there, and they say, oh, you know what? All those classes I took on Shemitah, all those classes I learned about Trumot to Masad, I don't need that anymore. I couldn't care less. I'm not going to learn a thing about it the rest of my life. And as far as I'm concerned, I can use that brain space for something else. That is mitchayev b'nafsho. Not the fact that when I read a Gemara today, that I say I've learned 4 times before or 3 times before, I said, it's like the first time I've ever seen it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about someone in this Mishnah who goes out of his way to purposely remove an idea from his head. Let's take a look at something from Rav Lau. In light of the fact that because of the previous Mishnayot, we talked about the idea of the evil of wasting time from Torah. Mosifa Mishnatenu, this Mishnah adds, Ve'omeret, and says, once a person has learned, and literally means filled his stomach with Torah, you still have a mitzvah to continue learning all the time. I'm going to say something so crazy how twice in 1 week certain things come up. I said the same thing the other day in a different class. Very often you'll hear people say, oh, I'm so full, I can't eat another thing. You'll never hear someone say, oh, I have so much money in my bank account, I couldn't take another shekel. He says a person could look at Torah and say, oh, you've had so much of it. Die, chalas, enough. No, you can never say that. In order to properly do the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, it's not enough to just on a surface, like a quick once through and say, okay, that's it, I learned it. There's a requirement that someone who learns, that the person should review his learning so he shouldn't forget it. This is one thing I will tell you, that in the yeshiva, they try to make an important statement, which is something personally I had a hard time with myself in the past. It's called chazara, review. So let's say you learn today, you learn a daf of Gemara, and you go to the Rashi and Tosfot and the Rush and the Mukhe Yosef and then the next morning before you start the next year, you review it again. I was never good at that. It's just I wanted to move on and move on and move on and move on. But and sometimes I actually would remember something. But he's telling us here that we need to review our stuff. If we don't do everything we can to remember that which we learned, because if we don't review it, it's showing it's not that important to us. Therefore, his sin's great. It says, and right now we are within 30 days before Pesach. At the end of Gemara, at the end of Masechet Megillah, it talks about the idea that Shloshim Yom Kodem Achag, 30 days before a holiday, you're supposed to already start learning about the holiday. Well, I'll give you an example. My oldest granddaughter, she should live and be well. We were talking a number of months ago. about Parshat Shavua. I forgot which one it was. And she said, well, and she's in Kita Bet. She's in second grade. And we're talking about the parsha. I says, I don't understand why we're learning it again this year. We learned the same parsha last year. So I tried, of course, to explain to her every year we learn something different and all. But that is a common approach when it comes to a lot of areas of halacha. Why do I need to learn about Pesach again? I learned about it, many years ago. And what really kills me is the statement of my year in Israel. I did my learning. That I gave a class once, a talk once, based on something from Rabbi Gottlieb Shlita, Rabbi David Gottlieb, who's fantastic if you don't know him. Called I titled it "There's No Such Thing as Spiritual Retirement." People who say, "Well, I did," and it's true. My greatest amount in depth of learning was for sure the year and a half, 2 years I was in Shalavim. There's no question about it. But if that's where I stopped, that's a big problem. So many people, when they use their expression, my year in Israel or my 2 years in Israel, often the subtext is that's when I did my learning. That's a terrible approach, especially if you're talking about halacha. Because if you learn the rules and regulations of something and something that was important, if you're going to be a doctor and you're going to be a nurse, you're going to be a lawyer, and you learn what you want for a year and then you never look at it again, it's a big problem for your patients and your clients. The Shen Kium, here, we're going to continue. Here, finish. But if from his perspective, from his side, he did make the ma'amatz, he made the effort. Hadarush, which is required, l'shmirat divrei Torah, whatever way you remember stuff, that you did it, you really tried to remember, it wasn't a waste of time. Even if you forgot what you learned, because you did what you tried to do. So if I learn a page of Gemara and I go back to it a year later or 4 years later in a cycle, whatever it might be, so I keep trying to go how I learn, how I try to remember something. I'm not talking about me personally. I mean the royal I as opposed to royal we. Then that's fine. That's how you remember. Incidentally, as a side note, I deal a lot with students whose Hebrew is not so great, and at the same time, whose parents are also Hebrew is not so great, and try to help give them skills of learning Hebrew. And one of the Klal Gadol, the top rule when it comes to learning pretty much anything, but especially a language, whether it's Hebrew or English, Chinese, Polish, doesn't make any difference. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. I learned myself. I taught myself Russian in the 70s, and I was pretty good. I can still read and write, and I can still say some things, but I don't use it. So even though I was 40 years ago, maybe and more, I was able to speak, carry on a conversation, decent conversation, write letters and all. I don't use it. So if you do, and the same thing is true with Hebrew, even though you're going to hear it on a daily basis, wherever you might be, if you learn a new word and you don't use it, you're going to forget it. And that's on a micro level. On a macro level, we're talking about Torah. When it comes to Torah, that's the goal of this prior and this Mishnah, even the ones before, but especially the last one and this one, is that we have to understand that if it's important to you, which it should be, there's certain klalim, there's certain rules that go with it, and that is consistency, that is review, that is making sure you set time to learn. And even if you do then forget something, it's normal. But if you purposely forget, meaning you don't care, you learn it, I say, I learned it, that's it, that's all I got, that's a problem. All right, we shall continue Bezrat Hashem next week. In the meantime, everyone should have a Shabbat Shalom. Hopefully, everyone's doing well, and we should hear all kinds of good news. Bezrat Hashem, B'Kavrov. Have a good day, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Be well.